Welcome back to Bet on Sports, everybody. And as promised, today is the first ever NASCAR episode, or the first episode dedicated strictly to NASCAR. It has made an appearance in a past episode. In this episode, I will break down the 2025 NASCAR schedule and season, one of the longest seasons in sports, running February to November. I'm excited. I think NASCAR isn't as loved as it should be in some ways. I guess I understand it. But anyway, we're going to look at the schedule, the teams, the drivers, and make some predictions on who I think is making the playoffs and winning the championship. It's going to be similar to what I do for season previews with other sports. Without further ado, let's get into it. So here we see our schedule. This is a nice color-coded schedule. Most of this comes directly from NASCAR and how they view their tracks. If you see red, that is a super speedway. I added Atlanta to that because I wanted to keep all the restrictor plate tracks together. Atlanta is technically viewed as an intermediate track because it's not 2.5 miles plus like Daytona and Talladega. But for me, I like to see all the restrictor plate tracks together. That's why Atlanta is with those two, and red. Orange is speedway, so anything that's 2 miles that really isn't restrictor plate. So your Michigan, your Pocono, and Indianapolis, those are really the only ones. Yellow is your road/street courses. I combined them because I didn't think it made sense to make a separate color just for Chicago. So that's road/street courses in yellow. Green is, as you can see, is the most abundant type of track in NASCAR, the most important track to be good racing or be fast at. That is your intermediate tracks. So your 1 mile to 2 mile tracks, they give you 1.5, 1.33, 1.75, any kind of those variations. Some of them are very different from other ones, but by and large, they're called your intermediate tracks. The blue ones, short track racing. Also, it's important to be good at any of these, but I'm a big fan of short track racing, as you will come to learn throughout this. But blue is the short tracks, anything less than a mile oval. And that should be all 5 of our colors. Anything underline is a crown jewel event. So the Daytona 500, the Coca-Cola 600, the Brickyard 400, and the Southern 500. Those are your 4 historical NASCAR crown jewel races that everybody wants to run or everybody wants to win. Just kind of like picking up a tennis Grand Slam where you win the Australian Open, the US Open, Wimbledon, and the French Open. It's kind of like that. But for NASCAR. And then you can see here the last 10 are bold. Those bolded ones are the playoff races that start with Darlington and end with Phoenix. And as you can see, it is 7 of the 10 of them are intermediate tracks, which is why it's so important to be good on them. So this is our schedule overview. I don't need, you guys can see and read all of it. I don't need to read all of it. I kind of told you my thoughts. As always, it's important to be very good on intermediate tracks. Those restrictor plate tracks in red are the tracks that usually have the most chaos. If you're not familiar with NASCAR or you're just not getting into it. And those are the ones where you get a lot of surprise winners that could really upset the apple cart when it comes to the playoffs. And sometimes road courses are like that too. Maybe some people who aren't as good on the ovals but are really good course ringers will win road courses too. So those are just some things to keep in mind as the NASCAR season goes on. Now, I'm trying something new here. I'm going to rank the tracks. We're going to go track type, and then I'm going to give you my top 10 tracks. And all of this is subject to change. I actually changed some of this while I was doing it as I was remembering past races, looking into some of the things that happened in the last couple seasons. Some of this moved around a little bit, but my favorite track type is a short track. I'm a big short track enthusiast. I think it's the lifeblood of the sport, all of the small tracks all around the country. And I don't think NASCAR runs as much as they used to, which is fine. But I personally love short tracks, tempers flaring, cars close together, using the chrome horn, a lot of bumper to bumper. I think short track racing is fun, even if they're still working out some of the kinks under the next gen car about how to make those races tighter and more interesting. Then super speedways, super speedway races, they're always fun, right? Bumper to bumper, you're going around in massive groups, right? Like, I think restrictor plate super speedway style racing is always fun. You always have big wrecks because of how close the pack is. And I personally love Daytona because I went to the 500 last year. I've been to the 500 before. I'm going again this year. So maybe there's some sentimental value to why I like Daytona so much. But super speedway racing, specifically at Daytona, I think is something that can make a fan out of anybody. When you smell the smells, you feel the cars, you hear the cars. There's nothing quite like it, and that really is for most of these tracks. Then I like the intermediate tracks. I mean, normally I like the smaller intermediate tracks, which is why I have like Darlington and Phoenix high on my list because I love those style tracks. I love Darlington. To me, it's still kind of a short track, even though it is classified as an intermediate. Phoenix but intermediate, I think, has some really good tracks. They also have some really bad tracks, which is why it's hard to move them higher than three. Uh, and intermediate, also the cool thing is just it incorporates, even though they're, like I said, all intermediate, sometimes you have a flatter oval, sometimes you have a more banked oval, sometimes you have dog legs, some of them are tri-ovals, some of them aren't tri-ovals. Like there's so many different kinds of racing found in the intermediate where it can be fun, but they do have some bad tracks. Then I have Speedway, which is really just Indianapolis, Pocono, and Michigan. I like Michigan and Indianapolis a little bit more than Pocono. I don't really like Pocono all that much. It is fun because it's a triangle, but outside of that, what does it really have? But Speedway, there's just not a lot. And then road street course, not that I'm necessarily anti street course or road course, and I appreciate that NASCAR is trying to draw new fans in and do these new things like the Chicago street course race, like going to Mexico City. I just don't always think NASCAR is good for that kind of racing. I think it has in the past, especially the recent past, has led to some pretty cool finishes. But for me personally, it's not that I hate road course or hate watching road course racing. I will watch other series from time to time. I just think NASCAR's bread and butter is ovals. That's what makes them distinct. It's what makes them unique, in my opinion. And I don't know. I just don't feel like the series, the cars, and everything are meant to do a whole bunch of road course racing. But I do appreciate they have a couple. Sometimes I miss the days of two or three instead of six, but um, a lot of people seem to like it, and it seems like some of their road course events are really, really big events. So I guess we should keep them. And then track Bristol, Bristol and Martinsville are 1 and 2. They're my two favorite all time tracks. I love watching them. They're both half mile. Bristol's a little bit more than half mile, but it's still in like it's close to half mile. Martinsville, the paperclip. It's a little bit slower than Bristol because Bristol has that high banking. But again, I love short tracks. I love watching Bristol and Martinsville races. And now that they're both in the playoffs as cutoff races, it's even more interesting because you get a short track where everybody's close together, and you add in the fact people are trying to advance in the playoffs. You get a lot of rubbing, a lot of bumping, and that makes for some fun times watching races. Also, my personal opinion: if NASCAR were to ever add a fifth crown jewel event, that the Bristol night race, I think, should be the number one contender. I've kind of already talked about Daytona and why I like Daytona. It's the most famous, I would say, the most famous global track. Even if it's just for the Rolex 24, but Daytona is an incredibly famous facility worldwide. There's a reason why they call it the World Center of Racing. Incredibly fun track. And Daytona is always going to put out a good race that ends in probably a fair amount of chaos. Darlington, the lady in black, the egg-shaped oval. I love watching races at Darlington. Having to run that high line, getting the Darlington stripe. It's such a historic racetrack, especially for NASCAR history. It's been around for a long time. They've been racing there. It has a crown jewel event. Something about that late Labor Day weekend Southern 500. It's not very frequently NASCAR gets to do a late Sunday night race. Darlington gets one of the few they do because of it being a long weekend. And I think Darlington is one of the most unique tracks in NASCAR. And I will always tune into a Darlington race, especially last year with some of the stuff that happened last year. With you had Chase Briscoe getting Stewart Haas Racing's final win. You never know what you're going to see at Darlington. It's a hard track. It takes a lot of skill. Phoenix, maybe part of this is because it's the championship race now. Part of it's because it has the dog leg, right? It's very unique in the way it's shaped, especially since they flipped it, and they're running the opposite direction on it now. Um, I guess they have been for a while, but Phoenix, always a fun racetrack. And like I said, they also have the championship race, which is arguably the most important race of the season, at least for Ford drivers. Charlotte Motor Speedway, the center of NASCAR, the heart of NASCAR is at Charlotte, is in Charlotte. That's where pretty much not all the teams, but like 99% of the teams are headquartered in the Charlotte metropolitan area. Charlotte has a crown jewel event, and I truthfully love watching the 600 for a lot of the similar reasons that I watch Arlington. Charlotte isn't as unique as Arlington, but it's another, it's the longest race in NASCAR, 600 miles, the Coca-Cola 600. It's on Memorial Day weekend. I always love seeing the paint jobs, all the red, white, and blue paint jobs. Charlotte Motor Speedway, it's just a classic track, a historic track, and I'll always love it for that. Dover Motor Speedway, the Monster Mile. I love the big statue of Miles out in front. And I think sometimes Dover has lost a little bit of its luster over the years. But I really miss, especially old school Dover, and it still kind of is that way where it got the name Monster Mile for a reason, right? It's a mile track. You have super high speed, super high banking. You hear drivers talking about how it feels like you're going down a roller coaster coming off the turns into the straightaway. It's super rough on equipment, right? Um, Shreds tires. And you have to have a good team and a tough driver to win there. I love Dover Motor Speedway. I wish it would. I wish it was still in some of its old glory, where the stadium, where the track was always sold out, and it just led to chaos watching the cars. Like well, for whatever reason, it used to really, really, really hurt and break down cars in a sense, and it still kind of does that, but maybe not to the same extent. Indy is Indy, right? I talk about historic racetracks. Brickyard is one of the most historic racetracks in NASCAR. It's also unique because it's a big 2 mile flat oval, super fast on the straightaways. You really got to slow down for the turns, and I don't think there's really a similar track to Indianapolis. On the entire NASCAR circuit. Plus, again, they host a crown jewel event in the Brickyard 400. Homestead, Miami. For me, honestly, it's kind of a vibes thing. Miami racing, maybe it's not the best racetrack. It's definitely not the worst. It's kind of just like an average track, right? It's an average intermediate. It is a little bit unique, I think, in shape and banking compared to a lot of the other intermediate tracks. But to me, there's something about the turquoise blue wall with all the palm trees going down the backstretch. I just love the vibes the track represents. And really, that's the reason why I put it on here. Um, Maybe that's a silly reason, but I just think it is a beautiful racetrack that has some interesting racing. Another track I love, even though in real life I like to always run the inside line, I love watching drivers run that car up 2 inches on the outside wall to make speed. And Miami is one of those tracks. And then New Hampshire, I think, is a fun one. It's kind of like similar to Dover in the way, and in some ways similar to some of these smaller intermediate tracks. And I kind of like that. I like those 1 mile style tracks of racing. New Hampshire is another unique track. What is it? Turns 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. I can never remember. One of the groups, one of the sides of the oval, is let's just say interesting. And I also love the area of the country it's in. I'm glad New England has a racetrack. New Hampshire is always a fun race to watch, even when it does rain and cars start slipping and going into the wall because NASCAR doesn't call it. Anyway, those are my top 10 tracks. It's all subject to change as this year goes on. Maybe I'll do some updated track power rankings and track type power rankings. Let me know if you guys want that, but this is where I am coming into the season based off of my particular favorites and watching the racing there at these tracks the last couple of years. New faces and new places. This is going to be a massive story this year. As you can see, There is 13 new faces in new places, including 2 rookies making the jump from Xfinity, although it is 2 rookies that have starts in the Cup Series. They just do not have full-time Cup experience. These aren't necessarily ordered in any particular way. Like, I do not think this is going to be the point standings for these teams 1 through 13. um, but I kind of just, the first 4 I grouped together and the last 2 I grouped together because they're similar connections. Obviously, the first 4: Chase Briscoe, Noah Gragson, Josh Berry, Ryan Preece. All 4 of those guys were with Stewart Haas Racing, which is kind of defunct. I guess it's moved into the Haas factory team era now. But Tony Stewart, a legend of the sport, is out. Gene Haas, if you're an F1 fan, yes, it's the same Haas team, decided to keep one car with the leadership he had in place, even though Tony Stewart sold everything from his perspective. And so we have 4 drivers that I think have potential, all moving to new teams. Chase Briscoe probably getting the best upgrade, going from Stewart Haas taking over for Martin Truex and the Joe Gibbs Racing 19. Noah Gragson, another guy I think with great potential, going from the 10 of Stewart Haas to the number 4 with Front Row, upcoming team. You know they're going to be fast on super speedways. Maybe Gragson can pick up a win. Josh Berry, the 4 for Stewart Haas Racing, goes to the 21 of Wood Brothers Racing, the oldest team in NASCAR. So much history with Wood Brothers. They are effectively a 4th Penske car in a lot of ways, so that'll be interesting to watch. Maybe Josh Berry and his short track prowess gets a win or get some good finishes. And Ryan Preece going from the 41 of Stewart Haas Racing to the 60 of RFK, Roush Fenway Keselowski Racing. Very interested in Ryan Preece because he's a guy that had, 2 or 3 good runs with Stewart Haas Racing, but it always felt like the 41 team was the slowest. Even if he was outrunning his teammates, it felt like the 41 was consistently finishing last in the points. And SHR really the last couple of years really declined. And I think all of these guys have potential and they all have their strengths and weaknesses. I think Briscoe, purely because he's in the best ride, is really going to flourish this year. I think Gregson, over the course of the next couple of years, I think Front Row is going to continue to get better and better and faster and faster. And I think Gregson is a good young driver to help drive those efforts. Josh Berry, I think, is a very good short track racer. It's going to be continuing to round it out, and he's still with a Ford team, and Ford always seems to be fast on super speedways. Ryan Preece, very similar to Josh Berry, and we know those RFK cars have some speed in them. They've been winning races ever the last couple of years with Keselowski coming into the ownership group. We've seen Buescher and Keselowski both win races. We've seen them both be fast on short tracks. Where's Ryan Preece good at? Short tracks. Could definitely see a win coming for Ryan Preece, or at least some better runs. Now we have some related moves here with McDowell, Zane Smith, Justin Haley, and Cody Ware. They kind of all moved around and replaced each other and moved from different places. Michael McDowell moves from his longtime home, where he won a Daytona 500 with Front Row Motorsports in the 34, to the 71 in Spire. Spire is a team that it's a team that's for a long time been viewed as a back marker, always running in the back. Now, Front Row Motorsports, or not Front Row, Spire is trying to make changes. They've definitely over the last year brought a lot of people into the organization, made a lot of changes that I think is going to help them continue to find speed, continue to get better, and bringing on a veteran like Michael McDowell can't hurt. It'll be interesting to see what McDowell does in the 71 Spire car. And then Zane Smith essentially trading with Michael McDowell, going from the 71 in the Spire to the 38 Front Row Motorsports. An important note here, it's not a new face in a new place. It's just a new car number. But Todd Gilliland was in the 38 for Front Row. He's moving over to the 34 for Front Row, which is why Zane Smith and Michael McDowell, in my eyes, are kind of getting traded for each other. Zane Smith goes over from Spire 71 back to Front Row Motorsports, where he won a Truck Series championship just 2 or 3 years. I think it was 2 years ago. Again, and I think that could help Zane Smith. He's familiar with the organization, and I think Front Row right now is a little bit ahead of Spire. I do think both of these teams are on the right trajectory to continue to get better. We might even see them win a race or two this year combined. Justin Haley moving over from the 51 of Rick Ware Racing to the 7-car Aspire to take over for Corey LaJoy. He's been the Aspire before. He's familiar with Chevy from his Kaulig racing days. He is a Cup Series winner. I'll be interested to see what Justin Haley does, especially because, like I said, Spire Motorsports bringing in who I think, a guy who I think is one of the best crew chiefs in all of NASCAR, and Rodney Childers from Stewart Haas Racing. Very, very interested to watch Justin Haley and Spire Motorsports as they continue to grow. And then Cody Ware used to be racing for Rick Ware. He was part-time last year due to some circumstances. If you're interested, you can look that up. He's coming back to race the 51 Rick Ware Racing Ford full-time this season. He has familiarity at that team. He's raced for it before. Again, Rick Ware Racing historically not very good. Usually one of the back markers. We'll see if they can make some of the strides that I think Spire is capable of making this season. AJ Allmendinger coming up from the Xfinity Series back to the 16 of Kaulig Racing. 2 years ago was full-time there. Last year wasn't. This year going back to full-time in the Cup Series. He is not a rookie because he's been in the Cup Series, and even before he was with Kaulig Racing, he had quite a few years at the Cup level. He'll be one of the best road course racers this year, and anytime that's the case, you have a chance to make the playoffs just for winning road course races. And I think Kaulig Racing has had some good runs. That's why I have them a little bit ahead of some of these other teams, because in the last couple of years, Kaulig has some guys that can consistently get in the top 20 where other teams can't. And they do have some shots at top 10s. And Allmendinger is a good driver, and I think he can have a decent year. Cole Custer coming back. He's another one of the guys that has Cup experience. Went back down to Xfinity for Stewart Haas, won a championship in 2023, said, I deserve to be back up here, finished second, was the runner-up in championship this year. And then after everything that happened in Stewart Haas Racing and it became Haas Factory Team, Cole Custer coming back up to run the 41, which is what he was running for Stewart Haas Racing, which has become Haas Factory Team. And he's going to come back up with a organization he's familiar with and an organization he has won an Xfinity Series championship with. I'll be interested to see what Haas Factory Team, what they turn into. I believe they're kind of like a associate team of almost a fourth team of RFK Racing. So maybe that helps them find some speed. And Cole Custer, we'll see what he can do. But I'm interested in Haas Factory Team. After you downsize so much and have so much movement, I think sometimes it's going to be hard to rebound and be good immediately. We'll see. Ty Dillon, a guy who's in and out of the Cup Series. He's coming up from the Truck Series last year to race the number 10 Kaulig. I've always called Ty Dillon chaos incarnate because I think he causes a lot of chaos, especially at speedway races. I'm interested to see if he does the same this season. And then the two rookies, both guys, like I said, Van Gisbergen has actually won a Cup Series race. Both these guys have Cup Series experience, but they will actually be rookies this year. Shane Van Gisbergen and Riley Herbst coming up from the Xfinity to the Cup Series full-time. Both are with pretty good teams, I would say, in Trackhouse and 23XI. I feel like Van Gisbergen is almost a shoo-in already to win a road course race. There's 6 of them, and he's one of the best, if not the best, road course racer in NASCAR. There's a lot of guys that are getting better at it, but we saw Van Gisbergen come up 2 years ago, never racing a NASCAR event, much less at the Cup Series, and he won his first ever appearance. And he's still competitive in road courses. I would almost expect him to win a road course race. The story for me is, how is he going to perform on ovals? That will determine, to me, how serious of a playoff threat he is, or even like a threat if he makes the playoffs for winning a road course race. And that's going to be the biggest determination to me of how much he's growing as a driver, is his success on ovals against the top competition in NASCAR. And then Riley Herbst is a guy who has that. I'm actually really interested to watch, because Riley Herbst is an ascending guy. It took forever for him to win his first Xfinity race, and then he won one, and then he won 2 last year, and he has a lot of good finishes. He always seems to be near the top 10 in the Xfinity Series, and I'm interested to see how he does, because 23XI is a pretty darn good team. It's a pretty darn good ride, so I'm interested to see if he gets it right away, if it takes a year to mature. I don't know, but Van Gisbergen and Riley Herbst could definitely be an interesting Rookie of the Year race. that I would lean Van Gisbergen just because I think he has the ability to win a race. So this is, I feel like, a lot more new faces and new places than normal, for some very understandable reasons with some guys. Uh, like I said, I think out of all the new faces, new places, I think Chase Briscoe is best set up for immediate success. But only time will tell. But out of your 36 full-time cars, 13 of them are new drivers. That is a pretty high percentage. It's a little bit over a third. But there they are. Now I'm going to move on to driver and team power rankings. Let's look at the team first, and then I will do the drivers. I didn't do all the drivers. I just did the top 20 because that's kind of includes the 16 playoff drivers and some guys that are on the bubble. Team rankings. As always, Hendrick and Joe Gibbs are 1-2. Hendrick seems to be a little bit better than Joe Gibbs, at least up and down. Top 4 to top 4. They're the only 2 4-car teams left in NASCAR now that Stewart-Haas Racing has sold a whole bunch of charters and essentially blown up their organization in a way. Hendrick Motorsports, though, you have Kyle Larson, you have Chase Elliott, you have William Byron, you have Alex Bowman. A great team. It's been the best in NASCAR for a long time. They're consistently at the top. It felt like after they lost, their big name Hall of Famers, they went through a short rebuilding phase for 2 or 3 years, and now they are back at the top of the sport with multiple championship contenders every single year. Joe Gibbs Racing, the second best team and consistently the best team in NASCAR. Hendrick might be first in all-time team wins. I believe Joe Gibbs is third behind Petty Racing. I think they'll catch them within the next couple of years, maybe even like 1 or 2. But Joe Gibbs Racing, a very good team. Hendrick Motorsports, the best. Those two have separated themselves. And it's kind of funny. I put Team Penske 3, but they've won the last 2 championships with Blaney and Logano. But I don't think they have the race-to-race consistency, and I don't think all 3 drivers have the race-to-race consistency. Hendrick and Joe Gibbs, I think, are a little bit better than Penske, even if Penske has won the last 2 championships. 23XI, when they've been a 2-car organization for the last couple of years. They're moving up to 3 this year, but they've shown a lot of speed. I think they're really fast. I think that continues this year. And I think Tyler Reddick could even push for a championship this year. But 23XI, I mean, they're almost a Joe Gibbs associate team. They're the 7 fastest Toyotas every week. I'm very interested to see them. 23X or RFK Racing. This is not a team that really, maybe until last year, I would have put my top 5 over Trackhouse. But RFK is fast. Brad Keselowski and Chris Buescher are both competing for wins almost every week. They have top 10 speed. Usually can a lot. It's frequent they have top 5 speed and race winning speed. The RFK rebuild seems like it's over and through, and I'm wondering when will they be championship contenders, but both of those guys are almost shoo-ins for the playoffs or at least competing for a playoff spot. Trackhouse, I think they have a strong number 1 in Ross Chastain. Suarez, it takes winning a race most of the time to get in. I don't think Suarez usually points his way in. We'll see what happens with Van Gisbergen and his ability. I think his ability on road courses could get them in, but Trackhouse usually has some pretty good speed. And they're kind of in the second tier of teams. I kind of look at the top 4 team. Well, I really look at Hendrick and Joe Gibbs as 1A, and then Penske and 23XI as 1B. And then RFK, Trackhouse, and Richard Childress, the next team we're going to talk about, is kind of that second tier for me. But RFK and Trackhouse, both fast. I think it's going to be close between those 2 teams most of the year. But I think I like Brad and Buescher a little bit better than I like Ross and Suarez, and then we'll see what happens with both of those teams and for the first time ever having a third car. Richard Childress, a legend of the sport, right? RCR Racing is a legend of the sport. They picked up, Kyle Busch is in his 3rd year there. It was a rough year for Richard Childress last year, not making the playoffs with either car, having a lot of controversy with that Austin Dillon Richmond win. I think Richard Childress rebounds a little bit this year. I wouldn't be shocked to see Kyle Busch find his way in the victory lane after his super long streak was broke last year. It's definitely a team I will be watching, but after the year they had last year, it's hard to put them above the teams ahead of them who all have race wins and just a better average finishing position than Richard Childress did last year. Front Row is an ascending team. I talked about them a little bit. I like them to continue to ascend. Uh, I think Todd Gilliland, Zane Smith, and Noah Gregson is arguably the best group of young drivers. Um, it's funny because I think Hendrick Motorsports, really all four of their drivers are young, but they've been around forever. So when you talk about like young prospects, guys who haven't been in the Cup Series that long, I think Front Row might have the best three. They're ascending as a team. They are now a Tier 1 team with Ford, which should only help them be faster. Definitely keep an eye on Front Row this year to maybe make a run up these rankings. Legacy Motor Club is another team that's recently become Tier 1, and I'm very interested to watch. I think Eric Jones doesn't get enough respect. I think he's a really good race car driver. I just think he hasn't gotten a lot of opportunities at big organizations. Eric Jones has already won a race in the 43 car that he is in, although it was when they were still Chevy. And I think Eric Jones might stick his nose in a couple of these races, get some top 10 finishes. I'm maybe Legacy Motor Club, their second year as a Tier 1 organization. They figure it out and they get going. I would not be surprised. Haas factory team, it's hard to judge where they're going to be. You're kind of just hoping that they have speed in some of the same places Stuart Haas Racing did. It's some of the same people, but it's kind of hard to judge them, but I don't think they're going to be completely slow. I think they'll probably be similar to what they have been. Maybe some of the changes and downsizing will help them get faster. Who knows? Wood Brothers Racing, Penske's fourth car in a way. I think it's hard to judge them. Were they super slow because they were just building slow cars in next gen? Were they super slow because of Harrison Burton? Who knows? This year will tell the story. Maybe they get a little bit faster. They're always going to be good on super speedway races. And I'm kind of just seeing if they can rebuild this team around Josh Berry for a couple of years and see if Berry can get some speed. Spire Motorsports and Colleague are so close to me. I actually had Colleague above them because I think Colleague is more proven. But last year, guys like Carson Hocevar and Zane Smith both had multiple really good finishes for Spire. Like I said, I think Spire's ascending. And there's a chance in my head that Spire could crack the top 10 in my team rankings. There's a lot of teams I think that are in similar boats from like 8 or 9 down to 12 with Spire that I think could all be wrestling with each other all season. And like I said, I've already talked about Spire Motorsports a lot, and I think that they could, assuming the things that they have changed and assuming some things break their way, I think Spire could have a much better year than people are expecting. Colleague Racing, I think, we'll see what Ty Dillon has. He's never really found it, I think, at the Cup level with any team. AJ Allmendinger, is going to be fast. He's used to this type of racing. He's raced against Cup guys for a long time, even though he's been back and forth. I think Allmendinger can definitely win a road course race, definitely get a lot of points from road course races, and I think that there's quite a few ovals that Colleague and Allmendinger has proven he can get top 15, top 20 finishes, threaten for top 10s, which could be good for points. If Colleague Racing is going to do anything this year, I think it's going to come from Allmendinger. And then Rick Ware Racing, sorry, you're probably the worst team right now. And I don't think there's any hope of overcoming anybody this year. Maybe there is, and I'm not giving them enough credit. We'll see what Cody Ware does, but I think Rick Ware Racing is going to see a lot of finishes outside the top 30 this year. Driver rankings, pretty self-explanatory. To be honest, I'm not going to talk about each driver individually. This is what I'll say. I think your top 7 are their own tier, right? Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, Tyler Reddick, Denny Hamlin, William Byron, Chase Elliott, and Christopher Bell. Those top 7, I feel like the last couple of years have been consistently the fastest drivers. Yes, there's some guys on certain types of tracks that have come up and competed with those guys, but every week I think those 7 guys are, they're going to bring a fast car. They're going to have a talented driver behind the wheel. And I think those are going to be 7 of your top drivers all year. Maybe they don't finish top 7 in points, but I think those are the only 7 teams I feel confident are going to be able to win just about any race that they show up to. I think those right now are your 7 best teams: driver, owner, pit crew, crew chief, all that stuff. Those are your top 7 teams. So I'm kind of have them in their own tier. Joey Logano is 8th, partially because he's the defending champion, so you can't drop him too low. We can argue on whether or not he deserves that championship based on historical precedent. I would argue it's the worst championship season of all time. But Joey Logano doesn't care because it's his third one, and he's the only active driver with 3 championships. And there's only one other active driver with multiple championships, and that's Kyle Busch. Um, but last year and even the year before, there was some difficult. They had long stretches where it was difficult for them to find speed. Uh, I'm going to assume that keeps getting better this year, but I'm going to keep my eye on Joey Logano, the defending champion, even if I think there's some, even if I think last year's championship was, let's just say, interesting. Also in his category, I have Ross Chastain. He's been consistent, a top 10 driver. It's been a top 10 team the last couple of years. That's Trackhouse's premier team, and I think Chase Briscoe is a top is borderline top 10. He may even make a run this year. JGR has better equipment and consistently better equipment than what Chase Briscoe has been used to. Briscoe has a lot of talent. He's won 2 races with Stewart-Haas Racing, and not the Stewart-Haas Racing of the 2010s. That was competing for championships every year and one of the best teams in NASCAR. The Stewart-Haas Racing at the end, that unfortunately was much slower. And I think Chase Briscoe has a lot of talent, and being with a good team, as long as him and James Smalls can kind of figure each other out and mesh quickly, I think that could be a really good team, and they could surprise a lot of people. I put Chris Buescher and Alex Bowman also in that tier, so that 8 to 12 is a second tier, and I like all those guys. Alex Bowman keeps on, a lot of people look down that he's like the lone man out at Hendrick Motorsports, and that the other 3 get whatever they want, and that the other 3 have established themselves, and Alex Bowman is there. But Alex Bowman has won some races. He did last year. He has some very good stretches, and I think he likes to prove people wrong, that he's just the 4th guy at Hendrick, and that he's the expendable one should a driver open up that Hendrick wants to sign. Bubba Wallace, it feels like he's getting better every year, and 23XI is getting better. I wouldn't be shocked for Bubba Wallace to win a race. I wouldn't be shocked to see Bubba Wallace end up in the playoffs again this year, or get back there. Bubba, arguably the most polarizing figure in NASCAR. He's a good driver with a good team. I think, maybe he has a better year than people expect. Brad Keselowski and Kyle Busch, it feels weird to put former champions this low, and I think it speaks to the competitive of NASCAR. I think NASCAR is so competitive. I do think that they have succeeded in that goal, where I truthfully think that 2 legendary drivers with so many career wins and one guy with one guy with 2 championships are this low. Do I think they might be top 10 talents? Probably, but going off of the last couple of years, who I trust, and maybe it is disrespectful because Brad was successful last year, won a race, and has been getting better with the new team, but NASCAR is so competitive, and some of these margins are razor thin. I definitely expect to see Kyle Busch and Brad Keselowski competing for a playoff spot all year. I think both of them could point their way in, and I think just as easily both of them could win 1 or 2 races and find themselves there. Austin Cindric, a playoff driver from last year. He's, up and down career so far. Won the Daytona 500 in his first season. Then made the playoffs, didn't go deep. Then didn't make the playoffs. And then last year he did make the playoffs on a wacky win. Without the win, I don't think he makes it, but that's not important. The point of NASCAR right now is you win, you make the playoffs. Shane Van Gisbergen is 17, largely on his road course racing prowess. He did surprise me at the clash at Bowman Gray. I try not to factor the clash in too much because it can be a really weird event and not necessarily telling of anything. But it was a good run from Van Gisbergen. I think I don't hate picking him to make the playoffs because, again, all you have to do is win 1 race, and with how good he is on the road course, that could very well happen. And then Ty Gibbs, a guy still waiting for his first win, and I don't think it's unreasonable to think he can get there. He's part of Joe Gibbs Racing, the 4th car that I have in this top 20 from JGR. Definitely maybe a little bit of nepotism, grandson of the guy who owns the team, but he has shown talent at every step of the way. Made it on points last year. I think Ty Gibbs could very well get his first win this year. But again, there's so much competition. There's so many good drivers. It's I don't feel as confident as I did just 5 years ago predicting guys who were going to win races because of how competitive it is. Daniel Suarez kind of hangs out around the same area Ty Gibbs does points wise. Probably needs a win to make it. And I'm giving Carson Hocevar a lot of credit. He had a really great second half of last year, was running a lot higher than I would say most people expect Spire guys to do. I think Hocevar has a lot of potential, and I think as Spire continues to build, you're going to hear a lot more from Carson Hocevar. Predicting who makes the playoffs. So obviously my locks, like I said, those top 7 guys, I think every year you can count on them to win at least one race. Most of them probably multiple races. You know they're going to be in the playoffs every year. I feel confident. 8 and 9, I think Chastain probably wins a race with his aggressive style of Trackhouse. Usually finds a way to get him there. Plus, I think he could point his way in easily because I don't think we'll see 16 winners. Maybe we do. Maybe we see more just with how much talent and how many teams are getting better and better in the new era of NASCAR. It's possible. I still don't think it's likely because some of these top drivers are going to find their way to 4 or 5 wins. And then, like I talked about Chase Briscoe already, I think he does win this year. I think he might win, might have his for the first time in his career, might win multiple races. I know everybody's going to say, well, Truex didn't win last year with the same team. Well, I think there's some other situations. I just think Briscoe driving in the best equipment he's driven in his entire career. I think him and James Smalls find a rapport, even if it's not immediate. And I think that the type of tracks Briscoe is really good at, right? Darlington, obviously, he's one. He's good at Phoenix. He's good at Martinsville. He's good at a lot of these small tracks. And Joe Gibbs Racing historically has been pretty darn good at most of them. And I think that combination could lead Briscoe to more wins. And that's why I feel comfortable putting him in as a lock. Somewhat sure. These are guys I want to say I'm sure and almost positive. They're definitely going to be top 16 in points, probably top 15 in points. Well, at least the first 4 of these guys are with Buescher, Logano, Bowman, and Keselowski. But I think that these guys could be in jeopardy should we get a lot of surprise winners, guys from the bubble or even outside of the bubble. I think could put these somewhat sure guys on the bubble with like what happened with Chris Buescher last year, where he was really good on points, but then didn't win a race, and there was enough surprise winners to throw him out of the playoffs. That's why I'm saying somewhat sure and not saying locks. Van Gisbergen, I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times. The only reason why I say somewhat sure is I don't know if he'll be able to point his way on. It's going to come down to his ability to race on the ovals. I just think he has 6 road course races to win, and I'm somewhat sure he wins one of those 6 road course races and finishes high enough in the points where he makes the playoffs. That's the only reason why he's on the list. If he doesn't win a road course race, I don't know how I feel about him making the playoffs. I'll leave it at that. And then the bubble is some guys that are familiar with the bubble. All these bubble guys, I think, will have the capability to win a race. Some of these guys have won a race at the Cup levels before. All of them have different strengths. I think some of these guys could win a short track. Some of these guys could win. I mean, anybody could win a restrictor plate track, but some of these guys have good restrictor plate histories. So any of these bubble guys, if it comes down to points, I think this is who's on the bubble. But I also think these 10 drivers, all of them, could win a race. Like Bubba's good at restrictor plate racing. He also has, won a race at Kansas. So maybe those 1.5 mile intermediates are for him. Kyle Busch is a 2-time champion with countless wins on all types of tracks. Ty Gibbs is a guy that can point his way in or pick up his first win. Suarez is a previous race winner. Cindric is a previous race winner. I like Zane Smith and Zane Smith, Noah Gragson, and Carson Hocevar are guys that haven't won a race, but they have top 5 finishes, and their teams have strengths on certain courses that I think could push them to get a win. Austin Dillon is a race winner and has made the playoffs multiple times. Ryan Preece, I think, is another guy that doesn't have a race win, but could find his way there with his new team. And, some of these guys on the bubble, I put it less than a 10% chance to make the playoffs, but it is still a chance. And I think everybody there either has the ability to win a race to get in or be close enough in points coming down the stretch. So, and if you're doing the math, assuming all my locks make it and my somewhat sure guys make it, that leaves 2 spots out of those 10 drivers. Which means going to the playoffs and award predictions, just ignore that award slide real quick. We're going to look at the round. The 16 drivers I have making it in no particular order are Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, Tyler Reddick, Denny Hamlin, William Byron, Chase Elliott, Christopher Bell, Chase Briscoe, Ross Chastain, Joey Logano, Chris Buescher, Alex Bowman, Brad Keselowski, Shane Van Gisbergen, I have winning a race to get in, Bubba Wallace, and Kyle Busch. Most of those guys have all made the playoffs for everybody but Van Gisbergen. A lot of these guys, you wouldn't be surprised, I think, if they made it. They're with great teams. They're at the top of the sport, right? Who do I have getting eliminated in the round of 16? Logano, Bowman, Van Gisbergen, Kyle Busch. If you couldn't tell, the names in red are the guys I have getting eliminated every round. And it's so hard. It's so hard. One bad race can throw you off. So many of these guys are so close in talent, are so close in speed, and just they're, like I said, I think the margins of success and failure in NASCAR have never been as razor thin as they are now. So it's hard saying some of those guys are going to make it, but are going to get eliminated. But that's just how I see it potentially playing out. Especially, the first round has an interesting group of racetracks. But the reason why I think Shane Van Gisbergen can get left out is because he has to outperform 4 other people without having any road courses in the first round. And I think that the other guys are going to be good enough in an ovals to point their way in over him. Right, like things like that. And I think Logano has a bad year after winning the championship. It is an odd year. It's not an even year for Logano. I think he could be the same speed as he was last year without as much luck. Round of 12. I'm not going to read all the names out. Maybe you're keeping track, or you can see the guys who are there still on the screen. Round of 12, I have Ross Chastain, Chris Buescher, Brad Keselowski, and Bubba Wallace out. Round of 12 is a very interesting round. It has some good track diversity. The round of 12 picking who was eliminated was arguably the hardest round for me. Because all 4 of those guys are great drivers with good cars, and all 4 of them have pretty good results on the tracks in round of 12, but a lot of these guys do. And then round of 8, I have Denny Hamlin, William Byron, Christopher Bell, and Chase Briscoe getting eliminated, leaving a round of 4, a championship round at Phoenix of Kyle Larson, Ryan Blaney, Tyler Reddick, and Chase Elliott, where I have Tyler Reddick beating all of those guys out and getting his first ever championship, and getting Michael Jordan, Denny Hamlin, and 23XI their first championship as a race team. I think Tyler Reddick has an even better year than he did last year, and I think he's going to continue to blossom and get better. Really hasn't been a Cup Series driver that long. 23XI hasn't been a team that long, and I think they continue to grow together, giving Reddick his first championship. So let's go down to the awards. Rookie of the Year, I think Van Gisbergen over Herbst. I think Van Gisbergen might score more points, but I think he definitely wins. Like I said, I've been saying it. I think he can win a race as a road course guy. Regular season champ, I think Kyle Larson returns to that throne this year. Almost was last year. We all know what happened with the Indy 500, Coca-Cola 600 double. I know he's going to try it again this year, but I don't think that Hendrick Motorsports is going to let him jeopardize not winning a regular season championship, because most likely if he doesn't have Indy 500 rain delay issues, he races the whole Coca-Cola 600 and probably gets in on and probably gets enough points at that race to win the regular season championship. So I think Kyle Larson returns and wins it this year. The Crown Jewels, I added this in here. Who wins the Crown Jewel events? Right, I already said it is Daytona 500. I think Blaney might pick it up. He's one of the better super speedway racers. Fords always do really well. I think Blaney finally gets his Daytona 500 this year. Obviously, the 500 is one of the hardest ones to pick. It's also hard to pick all these when we're this far out. Daytona is always hard to pick, and then the rest of these races, the earliest one that happens is the end of May. So maybe my picks change. I think Brad Keselowski gets a 600, gets the Coca-Cola 600 this year. It's such a long race. So much can happen. You need to have a strong mind. You need to have frequently a veteran driver. Brad Keselowski has a lot of experience in those events. He's been driving at the Cup Series level for over a decade, very long time. He knows what to expect in the 600. He'll be prepared for it. Almost won it last year. If it's not rain delayed, I think he could have very well won it. I think he returns this year, gets vengeance, and gets the Coca-Cola 600 victory. The Brickyard, This race was actually pretty fun this year, I'd say. A lot of cars showed speed at different point. And I think Tyler Reddick gets this crown jewel event. The Southern 500, Chase Briscoe won it last year. Sent Stort Haas Racing off with a win in a crown jewel race, no less. He finished second in the first race, finished first. He's always done well at Darlington, going back to his rookie year, even with the struggles he has had with Stort Haas Racing. It always seems like they bought a good car. Stort Haas Racing doesn't exist anymore. Don't think it matters. I think JGR is always one of the faster teams at Darlington. Toyota's seen the do well at Darlington for the most part, and I think Chase Briscoe loves that track, and I think he wins it again this year, except this year he makes the playoffs, and that's a first-round playoff race, getting him into the round of 12. Most popular driver award. This is the easiest thing to predict of the entire NASCAR season. It's easier than any other race. It's literally the easiest prediction anybody has in a NASCAR season is most popular driver. And this year, I think that most popular driver is Chase Elliott. A big shocker. He's won 7, 8 in a row at this point. I know it's hard to believe, but yes, Chase Elliott probably wins it again. And as I already said, my Cup champion is Tyler Reddick. Thank you, everybody, for listening. I hope you liked the NASCAR episode. Let me know if you want me to do a NASCAR weekly predictions, or even if it's just monthly, because there's a lot of weeks to a NASCAR season. Let me know if you want me to do something similar that I did with the NFL, where I did weekly predictions. We kept track, saw my record at the end of the year. It's a little bit harder to do with NASCAR, but I am willing to do it if you put in the comments that you want to see it. Like, comment, subscribe, all of that stuff. Like I said, that's the biggest way you can help me as a supporter. Come follow me on X. I try and tweet when there's some big sporting news or a big event going on, like the Super Bowl that happened last weekend. If you're new to NASCAR, you clicked on this video, you're new to NASCAR, highly recommend you watch it. It is a fun sport. It's a very unique sport. I can't wait for the season to start. The duels Thursday night, those are technically point-paying races if you're a top 10 driver, or if you finish in the top 10 in them. Tune into the duels, tune into the 500. Let me know your season predictions in the comments as well. Like I said, let me know what else you guys want to see in the future, what sports, what kind of episodes you want to see. Let me know if you want to see another Rage Week. And just to repeat myself one more time, let me know if you want to see more of the NASCAR content, and I will try to make it happen. Thank you guys for taking time out of your weeks and your days to listen. Everybody be safe. There's some weather over certain parts of the country. Peace.